Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine 2021 version 8. We're back with another series. We're doing these every month. And this time we're focused on NFTs. That's why our conference is called State of the Art Chain, and really focused on the future of their utility and, really exploring a lot of use cases. And, the interest has certainly peaked, but I think a lot of people don't know about this space as much. So I'm Roshan Mirajkar, one of your hosts, and very excited to be welcomed here by a returning guest. So with me here today, I have Luca Cosentino. He's the product lead at Oasis Labs. Luca, welcome back to the Reimagine series. And to start off with, how has everything been for you and your team in the past 6 months? And also tell us a little bit about how you even got involved in the industry. What was it that one or two things that got you involved?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great being here again. My involvement in blockchain goes back to 2013, when was the actual first time that I came across this new word called Bitcoin, this new thing called Bitcoin, and I was an intern at a large payment company. It was my first experience, and I was like, oh, maybe that is my occasion to like to impress my VPs or the people here. It was really like day probably 15 in my corporate career. Um, and I remember going to my VP and say, hey, I came across this thing. It was worth like few cents. Now it's worth $300. Anything you want me to do? Like, shall I spend some time researching at least to update the team? And the answer was like, not at all. Don't do it. We saw so many innovations. Not our role to look for that. Say, okay, wow, if these people who have been in payments for this long write off an innovation this quickly, it means that I'm totally off. So I used the proxy as a signal. Maybe that was the biggest mistake I've done to date. So I ended up buying a couple of Bitcoin back at $300 because I wanted to see what that meant, right? What is this? And I remember feeling extremely excited when I first started moving these Bitcoins around back and forth between a couple of wallets, just because like it gave me this incredible sense of freedom, which I couldn't fully explain because I didn't know much about the tech or about how this thing would work or how the banking system worked. But at the same time, I felt very empowered when I could move around the money on a Sunday afternoon without having to wait like 3 4 days to actually see my balance show up on the other account. It has been quite a rally. Like I kept this Bitcoin for a little while, then I sold it at 2000 because like when you make 7x on an asset, people think that you're doing something illegal, and so I said, okay, maybe I made too much. I don't want to have to deal with that, and that was like an experience back and forth for following years. And then every morning when Bitcoin crashed from 2000 back to I can't remember the number, but like 500, I was essentially that employee that walks into the floor and everyone makes fun of for having taken the best bet, which it's a fun position to be because you need to defend yourself. So anyway, that's just a fun story. But then I didn't really like spend too much time on the technical side of it, but like flash forward to 2016 and then 2017 when I moved to Berkeley for my MBA. I immediately got fascinated by how large the community was around blockchain, and I started spending way more time on reading and studying technical white papers with a few colleagues there. And that's the moment where I started understanding what blockchain could do, um, and what were the misconceptions with the market. I then met Don Song, which is the founder of the company Oasis Labs, also a famous Berkeley professor, computer science and deep learning. And yeah, we decided to start this journey. I became part of her team because the value proposition was really aligned, and I've been there since. We did the fundraise. We raised some money in the beginning. We created this team. We expanded this team, and now it's around 35 people. We launched this decentralized network that is now again it's fully decentralized, so we don't have any control over it. And we also created this level of abstraction for enterprises to use the blockchain without having to deal with the blockchain aspects.
Yeah, it's great to hear your journey. I think it's an interesting one, and everyone always gets into the space for different interests. So, I'm glad that you kind of got in through experimentation, and I'm glad. I'm excited to talk about a couple of things today, but that's sort of been one of the themes that a lot of people keep wondering what's going to drive mainstream adoption, and I think it's quite surprising what it turns out to be as we explore talking about NFTs today. But to kind of take a step back, tell us a little bit more about, since the time you've been at Oasis Labs, what is Oasis Labs exactly? Like, how do you guys contribute to the entire ecosystem or industry? And what has changed in the last 6 months for your company, if anything?
Yeah, Oasis' initial project was building this layer one blockchain, so the most bottom possible layer in blockchain, um, with two properties. The first one is like scalability, so the ability of supporting many more transactions that could fit in networks, and then the privacy aspect, which means that developers can write smart contracts that keep the data private and confidential while still enabling for computation, which is a very powerful, we think is a very powerful um, combination of properties because it enables these applications to keep the data private and with the users. And so the biggest contribution we give to this vision of this Web3 is the ability to create this user control web, which is this web where data and information, instead of being captured by cookies and a few companies, is actually captured by users themselves, who then have the ability to cooperate with some companies to share or not share information as they wish, and in exchange of the reward that they want. So that's the first thing that we've done. The network now is fully launched, it's spun off, it's fully decentralized, it's controlled by over, the consensus layer is actually executed by over 80 validators. We just launched a upgrade a couple of days ago. So that's our biggest contribution. There's a ton that needs to be done as per every other blockchain, but we think that we are seeing a very good results now from validators, exchanges, and people who have been interacting with the network. Now I focus on the Oasis Labs side, which is more sort of like company focused type of business, and also the main contributor to the Oasis network. And so what we're doing now is taking the properties of the Oasis network and abstracting the complexity and all the blockchain code in a series of APIs that can be consumed by companies who essentially can deal with their users in a way that favors the users and the companies, which means they leave ownership of the data or ownership of whatever assets they need to interact with their counterparts in the company.
Yeah, and I know last time we talked about a lot about DeFi and the responsible kind of data economy that's developing, especially with a lot of blockchain data that's just being created on a daily basis, even more than traditional finance. So, how do you think the industry has evolved from that? Kind of leading into where we stand currently today, which is NFT. So, like, why do you think they're so popular? And also, yeah, tell us a little bit about what do you think is the future of the data economy.
Yeah. So when we spoke last time, we essentially talked about DeFi, and we talked about the role of confidentiality in DeFi, which is a story that is still very applicable, and if anything, we're seeing like a growing need for protecting the interest, mainly because like institutions want to start dealing with blockchain, want to start dealing with DeFi, and they don't necessarily know how to do it because you can put your information out there and hope that people don't take it to their own advantage, right? That's basically impossible. And that's why the role of confidentiality becomes extremely important because again, it has nothing to do with like privacy coins, but it has this ability, it offers this ability to separate what needs to stay private and what needs to stay public, right? So that's still very applicable. But I'd say what has become really obvious now compared to 6 months ago is, at least in the short term, even what are the benefits of blockchain to the broader ecosystem, especially in the financial system, but also in other areas where ownership really matters, right? Ownership and data really matter. So before we were talking about this DeFi as this open system, transparent, where everyone could participate with a little bit more than an internet connection and a smartphone. We with this ability to move money 24/7, with this like ownership of your money, And that was very clear. What was like much less clear, and now I think has been like astonishing, is the power of programmability and portability of the assets within a certain ecosystem, right? This is what has been really clear with the second wave of DeFi, which was way more user friendly, and way more oriented towards like providing real benefits to the users rather than to like few crypto traders who will be self-motivated to try any product in exchange of any return. Um, and I think that has been like a fundamental property that has become clear now blockchain, and is going to be even more clear going forward. Think of these large institutions that are not only adopting Bitcoin or as a store of value, but think of all the other players that are now starting playing with DeFi and abstracting some of the complexity around like keys, user key management, and so on to make this DeFi more accessible. Think of the many wallets that have become now the primary interface for users with DeFi, and you think it's not going to take as long to imagine the situation where actually user would be able to store all their money with them, and these wallets that are now so just maybe like interfaces with the world will actually become everyone's bank, not right? So you essentially flip the model. Instead of being the user who goes to the bank and leaves the money there, now you can think of the money that stays in the user's wallet and the application that will ask for the money to the user directly in order to consume. So this has been like um, sort of bridging the two pieces from where we last spoke and today. Now, these new ideas of ownership and portability and the fact that the users become the owners of whatever they create, right? In conjunction with this bigger trend that is happening in the market, which is started maybe with the sharing economy and then evolved into other areas, right? So you can think of maybe um, secondary market for stocks or for stock options. You can think of cooperatives. You can think of um, this creators economy. You can think of like Clubhouse. You can think of newsletters. You can think of all these platforms that are constantly and increasingly evolving towards putting the individual like at the center. Um, you sort of start um, um, combining these new trends of DeFi for the money and the individual at the center of these products and the blockchain to start imagining what comes next, right? And now I think you start imagining this world where we don't talk anymore about just money or about just creation or about like sharing economy in broader context, but we talk about this broader ownership economy that is the essence and the resulting element of the combination of these three, like the ability to own the asset, the ability to represent the asset, and the ability to port these assets and exchange these assets freely, right? Um, yeah, so that has been maybe the biggest change in this last 6 months.
Yeah, and those are all still true today. A lot of the ideas you just said, in terms of people are still wanting to participate in decentralized finance. The numbers have only go up. A lot of the metrics people keep track of as far as like how much money is being locked into the space, and the rate of innovation has been pretty interesting. But I think what I also find interesting is kind of some things that you touched on. But this new wave of NFTs, right, that are everywhere right now, and that's kind of what's driving some of the mass adoption for crypto, I would say. um, I wanted to kind of ask you, from your perspective, what do you think is the current state of NFTs right now? Like, do you think people are using them as utilities per se, and like what are some of your ideas there of what people should be using them as?
Yeah. So I think the NFT space is extremely broad, and people haven't understood how broad the space is going to be in the next years. There is an estimation that I think 10% of the financial assets is gonna run on blockchain. I think that to some extent that could even be more if you consider assets that are not financial. Um, the reality is that when you start summing and overlapping current use cases with the properties that I mentioned before, so again, like the portability, the representation of assets and tokens, and you really start thinking, oh, why not on blockchain, right? like if you remember 2 years ago, the question is like, oh, why would you want to do this on blockchain? You can do it with a database. And now the question is flipping to like, oh, you need a blockchain for that. Like you cannot do this without a blockchain, right? Which is pretty exciting. So I think NFTs right now have been getting popularity in arts and maybe some like sport or some high visibility industry. But I do think that the NFTs can be much more than that and can actually represent a lot of the real world assets, whether they're physical or digital, in a way that is tracked by this like broad public ledger in a way that allows for the portability and the exchange. And again, the coolest thing of this is that you can flip the model. So before, let's start from the most basic example, which could be like a loyalty program of a retail store that issues like this loyalty card, right? Think of this situation before or even now. The retail store, let's say, you know, in the US, it could be Walmart, and they issue this loyalty card to me, right? And every time I go there, I spend some money and they give me some points. Now the company will have another problem, which is they will have to engage someone else to give me a reward or put together this program that allows me to change these points for some rewards. In essence, they need to create that liquidity for my tokens, right? They need to create some value for my points. Sorry, not tokens, but points. Now imagine this new situation. Imagine that Walmart actually issues tokens that are compatible with a certain blockchain standard, um, and and now I'm a token holder. And now what they can do with this token is as broad as you want it to be, because they can give me a portion of the revenues for being a very loyal customer. They can give me more tokens for referring friends. They can give me more tokens for visiting the store 3 times a month, or maybe they can give me tokens for answering feedback, answering questions to provide feedback to them. Like, you know, the range of use cases is massive. But what's even more interesting is that me having being a token holder, I can be identified because everyone can go and scan the blockchain and see which one are the wallets that contain these tokens. Which means that now every developer in the world, no matter who they are, where they are, what relationship they have with Walmart, they can create experiences for me as a token holder. So they can come and say, oh, you know what? Um, um, we see you are a token holder at Walmart. You can actually come here and swap your tokens for a bike ride this Sunday, right? And that requires like no relationship with Walmart whatsoever, but it only requires this incentive for developers to build experiences around that, which is the same thing that is happening in the crypto world. First, people acquire tokens, and then the DeFi movement is creating experiences for them. In the DeFi world, they're very tailored around like money. In the NFT world, they could be tailored around like again experiences or benefits. But the range of possibilities is massive, and I only tackle like the loyalty. I'm happy to explore more if that's interesting.
Yeah, I actually love how you separated the two things, right? Like DeFi, literally in the name, it's all about finance, and that there's a whole bunch of products there that are disrupting traditional finance, obviously. And then you said that, yeah, with NFTs, you have this other side, which is maybe why it appealed to so many of the regular folks, right? They could actually relate to a lot of the things that you're saying. I kind of love that example, and I love when people give these examples, even if they're far-fetching, because we need more of that. Um, the space has seen many surprises of a lot of players getting in. So, who do you think right now is the current top ecosystem leaders in NFTs? Is it like just companies that are going after consumers, or is there something around maybe like B2B for enterprises like you just described?
I think the case for okay, short answer. I think the leader is Ethereum here, and that's way more than my opinion. Is pretty like a fact at this point. Um, I think they've been great as a community of creating this like large ecosystem, and it's the default. But you know, like Ethereum has a lot of limitation, and also the use case, the expansion of the pie will create opportunities for essentially anyone, like all projects, recent projects, and projects that haven't even started yet. So um, um, But if you ask me about the enterprise use case, I think right now there has been a ton of enterprise interest. I don't think these tokens are really have found their place in the broader blockchain ecosystem, which is one of the reasons why at Oasis we think that that could be a sweet spot for us, given our familiarity with the level of abstraction of blockchain and the level of abstraction of um, the complexity of writing blockchain code and exposing your enterprise to a blockchain type of development. But we think that um, really via tokens, enterprises, no matter how small or big, can better create relationships with their users. So I was talking to a small company last week who is interested in working with us, and they want to build this credit card that has some loyalty program attached to it. But guess what? Like the biggest burden they have will be creating this loyalty program. While if they start using tokens that have certain standards, they can partner with other companies in a much easier way, because the standards are the same and the portability is going to be very high. And also what's even more interesting is that they don't have to figure out all the details at time zero, but they can start issuing this token, and then progressively they can embed different logics for this token holders, up to the point that they can also retroactively reward the people who have been participating in their ecosystem at time zero by saying, oh, I noticed that you've been a token holder since time zero. Now, you know what? Now onwards, I'm going to give you 1% of my revenues for the next 5 years. Now, this opens up to another point, which is this regulation point around what's a security, what's not a security. I don't want to go into that because we will not have enough time. But I also know that the rules are becoming way friendlier than they were before. You can think of this new security token offering. You can think of this equity crowdfunding that is making it possible for non-accredited investors to participate within certain ranges. So there is a lot of optimism in that space.
Yeah, and speaking about some of the opportunities that you see, we talked a lot about explored some of the use cases. Now let's cover what do you think is some of the problems in the NFT space, and tell me about Oasis Labs parcel product and where that fits in to the future of how you think things can get better.
Yeah, so we think that the NFT, we feel that people have underappreciated how important is the role of data in the NFT world. Um, and what I mean by that is, yeah, the NFT helps you tokenize something, right? And helps you establish some rules, which is extremely important. But there are use cases, and I can think of many, where these tokens is either attached to some flow of data or represents the data itself, depending on the use case you're covering. So let's imagine this situation. Let's imagine a situation where um, I am a company and I am helping creators, in particular musicians, um, get a cash advance on their royalties that they're going to receive in the next pay period, right? So let's make this example. You are an artist who's making a number of millions of streams on Spotify, and at the end of the year, you're going to make I don't know, 50K, right? This 50K doesn't come all at the end of the year, will come in pay periods, but it's not going to come daily, right? So at this point, you have two problems. More cash flow for you would mean higher velocity in growing your business, and more assets in your balance sheet would mean a higher debt capacity, right? So think of this situation. The actual royalty and the association between the royalty and the token, assuming you issue a token, actually depends on the data the Spotify gives to you that contains how much money you're making, what is your pay period, etc. This is because you cannot wait for the money to hit your bank account to issue that money, right? So you need some sort of proof that within those 15 days or whatever the pay period is, you need some guarantee that the money is actually going to hit your bank account. And so where is this data piece going in the current NFT ecosystem? Without that, you will have to build some level of trust that bridge this gap between the information that the money is going to come and the actual time when the money comes. In we, like, if you work for a corporation, you don't have this problem because it's pretty obvious that the money is going to come your way, and underwriter build some risk assessment on the company, right? But it's not, Google is not famous for not paying salaries, of course. I think they hit, I mean, I don't have the metric, but they hit their pay rate like 100% of the time, right? So there's not really much you want to improve there. But Spotify, there is uncertainty because you don't know how many people are going to stream the music like tomorrow, or how much money you're going to make for the last 10 days. So I'm deviating a little bit from your question because I wanted to emphasize the importance of having clarity on the data that is attached to that NFT. The NFT itself may not mean anything if it's not connected to a reliable data source. Now, it turns out that data source, where do you put it? Do you put it on the blockchain? Do you put it off chain, but then you put a key to decrypt it on the blockchain? Like, how does that work? This part hasn't been really figured out yet. And I think we can play in that space because this data needs to stay private, cannot be streamed to the blockchain, like people would not be happy about it. And is of immense value because it also adds a level of trust to what the NFT represents. If you breach this gap between the data and the token, the NFT, now the token is very valuable. And what you can do is that you can solve the two problems that I mentioned at the beginning, which is accessing your money early on and expanding your debt capacity. Because now you can sell your token, for instance, for the second problem, you can sell your token to your fan who would buy your token that represents maybe like future streams of revenue. By doing that, they would also pay a premium because they are your fan, your supporters, they want to be part of your community early on. If you make it big, they're going to make it big, but they're also going to help you get there. And now all of a sudden you have sold these tokens. These tokens are are sold in exchange for some money. The artist can expand its that capacity by adding assets to the balance sheet. And now the artist can go to a bank with a broader balance sheet and say, with a bigger balance sheet and say, hey, I want more credit than I asked for before, that I could get before. And now the opportunity to make the business bigger has expanded, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to pause it here because it was a long explanation. So apologies for that. But I hope it emphasizes the role of data that is not currently captured in the current NFT ecosystem.
Yeah, no problem. Because I think the explanations are the important part. People understanding why it's even valuable. Can you go a little bit deeper into like how does privacy provide value for NFTs? Because I've seen a lot of people talk about the art, only the art and the ownership aspect of it. I think you're talking about something like more futuristic and different. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems very futuristic, but there are companies that are building what I just said in a either fully centralized or fully decentralized fashion. None of them is ideal, we think, for working with current enterprises. Again, if you do it in a fully centralized way, you don't benefit from the blockchain. If you do it in a fully decentralized way, you don't have an entity to deal with, and this is generally a problem for an enterprise. But yeah. So the role of privacy is because whenever there is data or information attached to it, you have this trade-off between storing the data off chain or deciding who has access to this data. And it's pretty clear that whenever you think of tokenizing like invoices, royalties, data sets, what else? Even the list of the owners of these tokens, your loyalty program, like all the things that you can think of, you will have this trade-off between like abandoning the blockchain or revealing the data to everyone. And you don't want that. It's pretty intuitive that no blockchain will want that. And in the context of NFTs, it makes it really important because, yeah, the NFT is actually the token that represents something, but there is a flow of data that is attached to that in some cases is extremely important because it determines the value of the token itself. And what you want is when you want to protect this part of the data with privacy, which means that only a subset of the population will be able to access the data there because they're allowed to do it, because they're part of that community, because they have that agreement, and so on. So in the case of maybe like extracting the royalty information from Spotify before the royalty is issued, you want to make sure that how much money that artist is making, why, which songs have been streamed, and all this information is not revealed to the hundreds of thousands of participants of the blockchain, but only stay confined within maybe the artist itself, like themselves, or the audience of that artist. Like you can establish different rules. In the case of maybe other tokenized assets, even in the case of art, yeah, if art is only like that digital thing, maybe you don't need that privacy. That's not going to be playing like a huge role. But as long as there is some metadata that is associated to that piece of art, no matter whether it's digital or not, you want to protect that information. And also, don't forget that even in the real world, um, not every person who collects portraits or art is happy to have their name revealed or their name public. There's no public registry for who bought like a certain asset. Why? Because people don't necessarily want to be visible. You can argue that the pseudonymous part of the blockchain serves the purpose, but we all know that it's only going to be a matter of time before transforming a wallet address into an identity with a degree of confidence is going to be possible.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. NFTs are a great way to preserve your privacy and still do a lot of those, market functions that people want to do, whether it's ownership in things without being known. And I think in traditional finance, that's certainly tough. You have a lot of KYC, a lot of barriers. Not that they're bad, it's just more difficult. So, to kind of get near the end here, I have a few more questions for you. You're a heavily product focused person. So, what can you tell us, or what's your advice to the builders out there? What are like two considerations, your ethos when you're building, that are very important to you?
Yeah, yeah. I think my advice for other people would be understand what kind of product person you are, whether it's like a software engineer or a product manager. It doesn't really matter in this context. It both applies. I think one of the challenges in blockchain is that you need to overlap different layers, right? There is the technology layer, there is the use case and the adoption, there is the incentive layer. Like when you start thinking of all these layers all together, it's very easy to lose track of where you're going and to lose track of which problem you're solving. And so what you want is being extremely clear about what problem you're solving, for whom, with which logic, etc. You're gonna stumble upon a lot of cases where you have to balance a desperate trade-off between velocity and quality, velocity of what you ship and quality of what you ship. Quality may be expressed as not just as security, but also as innovation, right? So you will have to accept some trade-off between saying, "Oh, I'm not going to innovate on this part, but I'm going to do better at this part." Maybe it's the same in the traditional world, but at the speed at which blockchain moves, it makes it even more evident in the blockchain context. Maybe the second piece of advice that I can think of is also um, the there is a very weird relationship between the user, the feedback loop, and what comes next for blockchain. Um, blockchain constantly evolves its current state, and so if you go and ask users, hey, like what would you want, right? They may not be able to give you like an answer that is satisfactory. It's either too complicated or too far away, or maybe like not even that exciting. And so you stumble upon this sort of innovator's dilemma, which is, am I going to improve marginally the current situation, or I take maybe like additional 6 months to come up with a much better design that I think is going to be leading the industry forward. Generally, in blockchain, you lean towards this second approach, but the issue is that the industry changes by the time, like in that 6 months, the industry changes a lot. And maybe your innovation is no longer an innovation, or maybe it's no longer applicable. So you need to balance all this trade-off, which makes it very hard to work in blockchain, but also very exciting. I wrote a blog post for the people who are interested in that, who are considering maybe making a switch. It's less for product managers, but I think a lot of the questions are there. And essentially, pointing are a few questions that I think should be in your mind if you're thinking of working in crypto. The most important one, I think, is really which type of metrics you want to work on as a product manager or as a software engineer, and be very clear about what are your expectations for working in blockchain, working in crypto, and why not. Don't jump in this industry because it's cool and it's exciting, because you're gonna have a terribly hard time, because every new industry has a lot of challenges, nuances. Maybe you work for 3 months on something that you think is going to change the world, and then someone releases an alternative thing that it's basically based on what you're doing, but better because they are better. So it's very broad. Um, as a product manager at Oasis, we generally follow a pretty um, um, repetitive approach, I'd say. We come up with the problem, and the problem generally is one of three types. It could be a developer experience, it could be a final user experience, or it could be an enterprise experience, right? Um, then we figure what are we try to go really deep on what the problem looks like before even thinking of the potential solutions, or we go really deep to say, okay, does that make sense? So I think we give ourselves like a 70-30 split. 70% we try to propose solutions that are maybe in line with what the market is doing. 30% we try to innovate drastically and think very big and very different from where we are. And sometimes like the 30% becomes the 70% and becomes like capturing most of our effort. Sometimes we just, in the interest of speed, we move forward. Um, and and then like the third step is writing like a master spreadsheet of all the features that we could be building, adding the priorities, and try to have a sense of where that feature is going to take you next if we build it. That's maybe like the third one is maybe the hardest part, because it requires like living in the future a little bit, and that's not an easy exercise. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great advice for builders. And I think if there's anyone out there, it's definitely going to be Luca, who's going to convince a lot of these traditional product managers to maybe switch over and come work in the blockchain and crypto industry,
Great.
where as you mentioned, the metrics are so different. They're not the same as all. They're not the same at all, and you have to like relearn the what's deemed successful. Um,
Yeah.
to kind of end things off here, tell us a little bit about what is the future, what lies ahead for Oasis, maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, and also how can we get in touch with you and any helpful things you want people to check out.
Yeah, yeah. We define our work stream into maybe four areas. Let's say four areas. The first one is platform level, which means platform constantly evolve. There are new features, there are new there's new innovation. You can always make things better. So we dedicate a lot of effort in making sure that everything runs smoothly. The consensus layer works really well, which is the um, architecture is based on like paradigms. So even these paradigms work really well. We're launching a second one soon, which is going to be fully decentralized over a fully decentralized consensus. So it's like great improvement from my point of view. Um, and this also has to do with like user tooling, wallets, and all the aspects that make the network usable. We're receiving extremely good feedback, both from the people involved, like node operators, etc., but also when we do things like upgrading the network, right? Um, like things can go really well, can go like or can go really bad. And it's the third time in a row that it goes really well. So we upgrade in less than a second with no problems. The second stream of work that we're going to be focused on is understanding better this um, engine that allows to create NFTs that are not necessarily attached to art only, but have this property that I mentioned before of connecting the value in the real world, physical or digital, to the actual stream of data. And the third line of work or work stream would be related to exposing the point one, number one and two to the enterprises. So understanding what they need, why they need it, what are the ultimate goals, what infrastructure they're going to do, and this is going to lead to exciting development both from internal standpoint, but also partnerships with maybe like players that cover specific features that we don't want to build ourselves and we want to partner with. The fourth line of work is actually related to our community. It's a massive effort. We are making things 10 times better and easier and more user friendly and community friendly than they were before. So one thing I can think of is this developer hub that we just launched. It's on the oasisprotocol.org website. And there is like a massive step forward in defining um, um, in making it clear for developers, um, essentially like in linking what developers are looking for to where to find this information. So you go there and it's like, do you want to run a node? Do you want to run an application? Do you want to run an application that's compatible with Ethereum? Do you want to run an application that's compatible with another language? Here's how to do it, right? So we notice that developers always need to do this like massive guesswork and learning how these networks work. We want to make it easier. Um, yeah, so I think that's the comprehensive view of what we're doing. Our channels haven't changed since we spoke, so we always have this Twitter account, Telegram account, and we have many for many communities. And then we have a fully redesigned website for Oasis Labs. So I'd say the call to action here would be get in touch with us at community level or at product level. Anything is really fine. Yeah, so I think this is probably the best way to describe how to get in touch with us. Twitter is also a fantastic way to do it. My handle is L Cosent, Cosent. And yeah, I'm very active there, and I love getting inspiration and feedback from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's really awesome. I hope a lot of builders get in touch with you to build the future of the ecosystem. Luca, it was great talking to you here today. Thank you so much for joining us again at Reimagine 2020 V8.
Thank you. It was great being here. Look forward to the next one.
For sure. And for those of you that are watching this right now, stick around. We're bringing you more exclusive interviews, sneak peeks, and more builders building the future of the blockchain industry. Thank you.